We're having a band picnic. Okay, Beseder, ladies, welcome. Parsha's Vayechi. Okay, this is Parsha and Bereshit. Could you believe it?
No. Wow, the last Parsha.
So last Parsha in Bereshit. So besides having to get through our whole Parsha, we have to look at Bereshit as a whole. This Shabbos, if any of us make it to Shul, and I'm not judging anybody who does or doesn't, when we finish the Parsha, if you go to the end, it says, it's going to say, blah, 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 over here, the last pasuk, it says, about the Chazan, the Balkair is going to read, Vayamas Yosef ben Mea v'Eser Shanim, V'yechontu Yosef v'yisem ba'aron b'Mitzrayim, and everybody's going to scream.
Chazak.
Oh my gosh. Lame. What are they going to say? Chazak, Vinny, Chazak. They're not going to we're still asleep. What? Mazik Hashur. And therefore, okay, I'll remember that one, Noah. Chazak, Vinny, Chazak. Okay, so Chazak, ladies, stick with me. So Chazak, Vinny, Chazak means that we should be strong, we should be strengthened. And there's a whole conversation about, well, obviously, why do we say Chazak, Vinny, Chazak? Who are we talking to? We say to be strong. So a lot of the commentaries talk about, we're talking to Torah. We're talking to Torah itself to be strong. Torah Shebachtav, the written Torah, the oral Torah, and the Chazek, and therefore we will be strengthened. But I'm going to give you we're going to start with a plug and a bracha. In case any of us make it to Shul, and I do say that with a high degree of skepticism because I don't think I'm planning on moving, so I just assume everybody else wants to stay on their couch. But in case we do, there is an incredible power being belted out by every single community that you go to. And what they are saying to us is, Chazak, v'nit chazek, to be strong, and to be strengthened. And my bracha to us, whether we actually make it to Shul, which is better, or even if you just are sitting at home and thinking the intention, what do I want the blessing of the community to be strengthened in? Because everybody's going to shout out, be strong, be strengthened. If I think for a second, okay, more than a second, about something in my life that I want to tweak, and I need that extra boost of the whole community cheering me on. They don't have to know what it is. They're not don't say it. You don't need to say it to anybody, but I will know that they are blessing me, that we are blessing each other to be strong, to be strengthened. Let's use that energy. Let's use that power. Something that we've been trying. There's something that we want to do. It doesn't be the major, biggest, most massive thing. Something, a step that I wanted to take that I need a push to get me over the finish line. This is the week that we're literally everybody, even in the calmest little show, they're going to be shouting. So take that energy and say and use it. Let it be focused. Let it be. Manifest. Help them manifest what it is that you want to be doing, because it's there. The bracha is there. We might as well tap into the energy of it. Okay. So the other thing that we're going to have to do, what we're going to do after, we'll do it for a second first. Yeah, we're going to go backwards for a second. But the other thing that we have to do when we say Chazak, when we have Chazak, and this is the end of we're closing the whole Chumash, well, not the whole Chumash, Chumash Bereshis, we're closing Chumash Bereshis. We have to take I'm losing my words. We have to reflect backwards, and we have to say, what does the whole book look like? But what is the whole book teaching us, and what is the whole book speaking to us? It's not just this Parsha. We also have the whole book that we need to reflect back on. So two things I want to say. The book of Bereshis is called it's not called Bereshis in the Gemara and by the Chachamim. It's called Sefer HaYashar, which we've discussed. The book of the upright, the people who walk upright with God, and it goes from creation all the way to the formation of the what will be the Jewish people. Right? We start with, in the beginning there was nothing, and God created heaven and earth, and it finishes off with the tribes coming down to Egypt, the beginning of their exodus, and the really the beginning of the Jewish people, the formation of what will become the Jewish people. We could argue whether they are the Jewish people, whether they're not the Jewish people, but this will definitely become the Jewish people. And that growth process, and one of the things that we're actually going to see in this week's Parsha are the first brothers that are actually going to get along. It's going to happen in this week's Parsha. And so in this place, I think when we talk about how we walk with God, this is the way we want to do it. Not like this. Like this. We're proud Jewish women. We have a relationship with Hashem. We're walking tall. We're walking strong. We're proud of who we are. We're working on who we are. This is what Bereshit is teaching us, where you are taking this big world creation and we're really bringing it into what does it mean to us, the Jewish people. So I want to give us all a bracha that we, not that we find our spine, we have our spine, but to not be afraid to use it, to not be afraid to stand up tall and straight and say, this is who I am, and this is what I believe, and this is where I'm going, and this is my relationship with God. And to be blessed when we do that, when we can say, this is it, this is who I am, to take a taste from the Sefer Yashar and to really bring a little bit into our own life. So now let's go into our Parsha. Parsha's Vayechi, okay? Got to open your Chumash for this, because Rose, you're not going to see what's flying. One of the things you may or may not have noticed in general, when you look through a Chumash on the Hebrew side, that it is scattered with random P's and Samachs. Did anybody ever notice that?
Yes, I just understand.
Right? There are these random, like at the end of a verse, you're going to find a Pei, you're going to find a Samach. Of course, right now I can't show you an example because, okay, you got one? Give me a chapter and a verse.
Then that hour at the end.
Mem, of course I can't find anything.
No, it's Zayin.
Yeah, it's right before. It's right before. It's Mem Zayin. It's right before Mem Chet Aleph. It's right before Mem Chet Aleph.
Yes.
The end of Mem Zayin. It's sometimes in that Chumash it's hard to figure out where it's coming and going. Okay, so you're going to find Peis and Samachs sprinkled all throughout the Chumash. And what it is, you're too far. There's going to be a bunch of them. You're going to find lots of Peis and Samachs. And what Peis and Samachs are, it's a sign to us that says Ptucha or Stuma. It is open or it is closed. In a Sefer Torah, we know there are no chapters and verses. There's no numbers of anything. So when an idea is finished, there is a specific amount of spacing that goes on before the next idea starts. So Ptucha means that it's open. I believe that there's a space of 9 letters, and that could happen any place in the line. And Stuma is a smaller amount, but it's not no spaces. Okay. Now, if you take a look and you go back to the end of Parsha's Vayigash, right? We would expect if there is a Parsha ending, there should be a letter there. There should be.
What was it?
Pei is Ptucha and Samach is Stuma. Ptucha is like a space of like 9 letters, I think, and Stuma, I think, is 3. I don't remember exactly. And it tells you how many spaces the Sefer leaves in a Sefer Torah. When he writes the Torah scroll, how many spaces does he leave between this idea and the next idea? So Pei means there are more spaces, and Samach means there are less spaces. Now, if you look at the end of Vayigash, what would we expect to find at the end of Vayigash? It has to have either a Pei or a Samach, because a Parsha is ending and a new Parsha is finishing. No, Parsha is ending and a new Parsha is starting. But look back in your Chumash and tell me what you see at the end after chapter 47, verse 27. What do you see there? Nothing. Nothing. There is nothing. If you actually look in a Torah scroll, there is no space between last week's Parsha and this week's Parsha. It just continues. There's no 3 spaces. There's no 9 spaces. There's no space there at all. And we're going to look into Rashi. We're going to look into Rashi, our first Rashi of our pasuk, and Rashi asks, Lama Parsha zu Stuma? Why is this Parsha closed? Okay, and it's closed, not a small space. It has no space. So that is called a totally closed Parsha. And Rashi says, once Yaakov, our forefather, passed away, nistemu einehem v'libam she'Yisrael, mitzarat hashibud. The eyes and the hearts of the Jewish people were closed because of the exile, because of the pain of the exile, because that's when they start to enslave them. Another thing that Rashi says, Shebikesh legalis, that Yaakov wanted to give to his children the end of time, when it was taken away from him. And that's from the Bereshit Rabbah, that's from the Medrash. So Rashi's going to give us two things. So the first thing I want to tell you is, yesh kazeh davar, there is such a thing of spaces in the Torah. This is the only Parsha that has no spaces. So it's considered totally closed. We know that a new Parsha started because we have a breakup also from Moshe. So that's how we know that it's going to happen. But in a Torah, there is no symbol, there's no place for this. What does this mean? So we're going to talk about the second thing that Rashi does, that Rashi brings down, and I will bring you, and I will get back to the first thing he says, but remind me if I don't, because it's towards the end of the Parsha. Okay? So what does it mean? So Yaakov's, now it's at the end of his life. Okay, it's talking about Vayechi Yaakov. He lived in Yaakov for 17 years, and it tells us he lived for 147 years. He's at the end of his life, and he wants to start putting his affairs in order. And the first thing he wants to do is he calls all his children. He wants to, Rashi says, he wants to tell them, when is the Kates? When is this going to end? When is this gullus going to end? There's a whole debate on the Mafarshim. Did he want to tell them when they were leaving Egypt? Did he want to tell them when they were leaving the final the final gullus? What was he wanting? What was he wanting for that to make sense in English? What did he want to tell them? But Hashem took away his Ruach HaKodesh and basically is telling him, you cannot share this information. Now, why does Yaakov have this information? Yaakov has this information because we discussed this briefly last week. Mitzrayim was not an exile for him. Yaakov had his best years in Egypt. Everything was fantastic. The family was united. They were learning. He was learning Torah with his grandchildren. The Medrash tells us that Yosef's son used to come and learn with his grandfather. He stayed in Goshen. He learned with his grandfather. Like, this was ultimate nachas from a child who disappeared for 22 years. He did not think he was ever going to see him again. And now to be learning Torah with that child's child, wow. This Yaakov's time in Egypt was amazing. It was, so Rashi says, the best years of his life. Egypt for Yaakov is not a challenge. It's not his exile. He is, Hashem, last week's Parsha, which we pointed out, that Hashem says to Yaakov when he's going down and he's afraid, he says, don't be afraid. Yosef's going to put his hands over your eyes. You're going to be shielded from everything negative. You're not going to see anything bad. You're going to just have it's going to be amazing for you. So because it's not his exile, he knows when it's going to end. What is the definition of exile? The definition of exile is, how long is it going to be? We have a friend. He was trying out for special forces in the Israeli army. And at one point, they told them, start crawling. They didn't say crawl for 5 days, crawl for 100 days, crawl for 5 miles. They didn't say anything. Start crawling. And he said the worst part was the not knowing. Tell me I have to do this for 5 days. I'll pace myself. It's going to be long. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be whatever, but it's going to be, I know how it's going to end. I know I have to pace myself for 5 days of crawling, right? But the not knowing makes it very hard. And he said what actually happened in their group was that one of the boys said, I quit. I can't do this. And as soon as he said that, they're like, okay, everybody can go off now. Because they were trying to get somebody, they needed to cut down the number. I don't know exactly what the logic of it was. They had to cut down the numbers. They had too many people who were sticking it out to the end. As soon as one person quit, everybody else was off. They didn't have to, they crawled for 5 meters and they were all off. Gullus is not knowing. If Yaakov's sons had known that we are going to be in Gullus for 200 years, it would have been terrible. But they would have had an end. They would have known where it was going to end. And the knowledge of the end makes it a little bit less terrible. It makes it a little bit less terrible, meaning I'm not going to see it in my lifetime, my children, but you could give hope. You could pace yourself. And then as soon as the children have that, it's not a gullus for them anymore. As soon as they have the end date, it's not a gullus anymore. Now, Yaakov doesn't get this part of the conversation. He's like, oh my gosh, what happened? Probably probably my family is following the pattern that I had by my father and my grandfather. My father and my grandfather both had one amazingly righteous child and one child who was really not. So perhaps that is what the issue is here, that one of these 12 boys who are standing around my bed now are in fact not so righteous. And when they realize that, the Gemara brings this whole conversation, when they realize that I don't know, the Gemara doesn't say how they knew what he was thinking. I don't think he said to them, is everybody here, like, what's everybody's, is everybody still with the program? I don't think he said that, but the Gemara brings this conversation. When they realized what he was thinking, they all said to him as one person, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. They were talking to Yisrael, their father, and they said, listen, Yisrael, listen, our father, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. We all have the same God. We all are sharing the same God. And when Yaakov hears that, he responds with, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Olam Vad. And according to the Gemara, this is the first recording of the Shema. We know we're going to have it in the Chumash. It's going to come in a couple of Chumashim. It's not coming yet, but according to the Gemara, this is the first time we have this interaction. It's the first time we have the Shema. It's a conversation, an intergenerational conversation. And one of the things that the more modern commentaries talk about, that we really have two relationships with Shema. We have the Yaakov conversation, where Shema is reaffirming our familial connection to Hashem and that generational continuity, and where Moshe brings Shema, it's about accepting the oneness of Hashem and the bigger global picture, and really we have to look into both of those things. When we say Shema, we have to have both of those things. Yes, we're accepting Hashem, the God, the King of all the everything, the Hashem of the seven heavens and the earth and the four corners of the world, which we talk about, but also like Elokeinu, my God, Shema Yisrael, like I'm in this relationship, and we really have both of those things. Parenthetically, I'll take your question in a second, Rivka, but parenthetically, the Gemara, they have the question of when we say Shema I'm literally losing my words. When we say Shema on a daily basis, we say Baruch Shem quietly. We don't say it out loud, because the Gemara asked the question. Yaakov said it out loud. Moshe didn't say it at all. What do we do? So the compromise is that we say it under our breath, except for one time a year, when on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, we go back into either the angelic state, which is what we all talk about, or the Yaakov state of going and saying it out loud.
What does that mean?
Baruch Shem Kavod, blessed is your name. Baruch Shem Kavod, blessed is the name of Hashem. I got to look inside. I can't remember it, but I can't translate it and say it. Baruch Shem Kavod, blessed is your glorious name forever and ever. Right?
Glorious, the name of your glorious kingdom.
The name of your glorious kingdom, what she said. Okay, so that's the beginning of our Parsha. Our Parsha is going to deal mainly with Yaakov's final time. It's not so clear how long it's going to be. It's going to be a week or whatever, But it's a short, like that's the bulk of our Parsha. The first thing that happens is that he calls Yosef, and he says to him to please do not bury me in Egypt. Do not bury me in Egypt. Please take me back to where? Hebron, exactly. Take me back to the land of Canaan. Bury me in the Maras Machpelah. And he asked Yosef to swear that he's in fact going to do that. And Yosef does agree to it. What's interesting, if you're following along with me, chapter 48 picks up, meaning we have this interaction that Yaakov asks Yosef to bury him over there, and he swears. And then we have that Yosef finds out that his father is sick, and he brings his children to get blessed by his father. And then in that interaction, he let's go through it a second so I make a little bit of sense. Okay, so Yosef says he hears that his father is sick. If you're following Memches, he takes his two children, Menashe and Ephraim, and Yaakov hears that Yosef's coming with his children, and he strengthens himself and he sits himself up, and Yaakov starts giving him some history that Hashem appeared to me in Luz, and he blessed me, and he said that I'm going to make you very multiple. No, that doesn't make sense. I'll make you a lot. I don't know. Somebody look for the better English, and I'm going to make you for a kahal amim. I'm going to make you to a group of nations, and I'm going to give you this land. And then he says, Yaakov says to Yosef, basically, the tell that you're going to be, when Hashem said that you're going to be kahal amim, Yaakov took that to mean that he was going to have 2 more tribes born, and he only had 1 more. Only Binyamin was born after that blessing that Hashem gave him. And so Yaakov is essentially telling Yosef, I promised 2 and I only got 1. And so what I'm going to do in verse 5, Va'ata now shnei banecha noladim lecha be'eretz Mitzrayim. The 2 children who were born to you till we got here, before the family came here, liheim, they're mine. Ephraim, Umanasha, Reuben, Ukashim, Hayuli, Yuli. Ephraim and Manasseh are going to be like my children. That means I'm taking Ephraim and Manasseh. I'm supposed to get 2 more. I only got 1 more. So I'm going to take I'm going to basically split you. So you I already have. If I take 1 more of you, does that make sense? The numbers make sense? Somebody's following the math? So I promised 2. I promised 2. I had 10. I'm promised 2. I had 1 more. So now, so they're going to be, no, what's going to happen is Ephraim and Manasseh are going to step out of Yosef. Yosef is going to split into Ephraim and Manasseh. So we're going to have this number of 12 where Yosef is not included, and they're going to be part of it. Now we know that whenever Yosef is not included, the tribe of Levi is also not included, meaning whether Levi is the decider or Yosef is the decider, whenever something happens and we need to pull Levi out, Yosef gets split. Okay, so for example, when I'm going to give you for examples to make more sense. The tribe of Levi does not get territory in the land of Israel because they're Kohanim. So the Torah says very clearly, because Hashem is your portion, you don't get a portion of the land of Israel.
Where do they live?
They live in the cities of refuge. There are cities that are set up for there's cities that were,
really?
yes.
I didn't realize they were populated cities.
Yeah. So first of all, don't let me, I'm going to get back to your question. Let me finish that. So what happens is the tribe of Levi doesn't get a portion of the land of Israel. We have to split the land into 12 because 12 is our number. 12 is the number. The zodiac is 12. There's 12 axes for the earth. It's all coming back to the same source. 12 tribes is all the same thing. So how do we have 12 if Levi isn't getting territory? Yosef doesn't get territory as Yosef. He gets territory as Manasseh and Ephraim. Okay, so they actually get a double portion of the land of Israel. Yosef gets a double portion.
So when the sea split and then every tribe had their own portion and Levi had their own portion?
Then Levi had a portion, so then Yosef goes as 1.
Okay.
Manasseh and Ephraim, when Levi is in, Yosef is 1. When Levi is out, Yosef is out, and Manasseh and Ephraim are in. And we're going to have it at the end of the Parsha. When it comes time to bury Yaakov, and Yaakov says, Yosef doesn't carry because he's the king, and Levi doesn't carry because he's going to carry the ark. Manasseh and Ephraim come in. Okay, so they're going to be, they're the only grandchildren who have the status of tribes. Now, how often do they have the status of tribes, and where does it show up? So we know for the division of the land, it definitely shows up. And the question of otherwise, how does it show up? I don't know 100% sure. Okay, we start to answer your question, where do the Levites live? Every single tribe had to set aside cities within their territory for cities for the Levites. They each had to set aside, I think, 7 cities. Of those cities, that each, I think that's set aside 7. Of those 7 that were set aside, 48 were designated as cities of refuge. The Levites lived in all of those cities, and actually any city of the Levites could act as a city of refuge, not only the official cities of refuge. Different story, different conversation. Just another random, interesting fact, as Rachel says, fun fact. Every single city that the tribes had to set aside for the Levites had a green belt around it. There was an area of 2 mil, which is, I don't know if it's exactly 2 miles, whatever the halachic thing is, a green belt around each city. A green belt, a green area. What? A belt.
Like grass?
Yeah, they had green area, trees, grass, whatever. It was not, you were not allowed to build houses there around each city.
It was 2 miles wide?
Beyond the 2 mil. 2 mil is not exactly 2 miles, but beyond each city, there was green space. You look very confused.
Were they cities, like, it was all green space except for the cities, no?
Yeah, but if my city ends at this border, why can't I build right next to it? The next city that space is protected area and you're not allowed to build houses in it. That's what it means by a green belt.
To keep the cities from expanding.
To keep greener, you could argue 100 different reasons why it was like that.
I'm having a hard time picturing it. You're saying the city would end and then there
was a space, I think 2 mil past the city boundaries as all around that you couldn't build up.
For every city or?
The cities of the Levite cities. The cities that were designated for the Levites had to have like a green belt around it. If you ask me, my personal opinion, I think like there's this place so it doesn't become this like claustrophobic, like,
First environment.
Exactly. So like Rachel says, fun fact.
So, good question.
Yes.
So, the Kohanim come from the family of Moshe and Aaron.
They come from Levi. The Kohanim only come from Aaron.
So, ladies.
The tribe of Levi,
Yeah.
Levi has 3 sons. Of those 3 sons, most of them are Levites. Of one son, of Kahas, one of those children, Aaron, have the Kohanim come from him.
Okay, so the Kohanim only come from Aaron.
Correct. They don't come from Aaron and Moshe, they only come from Aaron. But they're all under the subheading of Levi. So Kohanim and Leviim all live in these cities. They don't have their own cities.
Oh, Kohanim also.
Kohanim and Leviim, yeah, where else are they gonna live? They're
I thought that all the Kohanim were in the basement.
No, they had turns where they worked in the Beis Hamikdash.
And then
Once
they traveled there.
once the community got bigger, meaning when you had, Aaron and his 2 sons, like they were on duty all the time, but once the community got bigger, they had mishmarot, they had each family had a week that they did service in the Beis Hamikdash, except for like the not the high it's like the Shalosh Regalim, when it was so many people coming, all hands on deck. Anybody who wanted to come could come. They talk, the Gemara has a whole discussion about Korban Pesach, the lines of the Kohanim and the Leviim and how they were doing the service. It was like, you needed a lot of people there. But regular, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, like not a holiday, it was just one family was on call for that
It
week.
was like a
Rotation. Yeah. It's called mishmeret. It's called a watching. Who organized it?
Was it like on a piece of paper?
I don't know. I will look into that for you. I don't know who organized the mishmeret. I'm going to just write this down because I'm never going to remember. Does anybody have a scrap of paper that I could write on? Thank you. I've learned not to trust my memory for anything. Who organized? Okay. Okay. I don't know. Good question. Okay. And then after he's like talking about this, that Menashe and Ephraim are part of the tribes, he goes into Vani Bavoy Padan. When I was coming back from Padan Aram, Mesa Lai Rachel passed away. She was in the land of Canaan, and I just buried her on the side, and I buried her there. And he said, and Rashi says that Yaakov was saying to Yosef, like, I know you have hard feelings to me. Like, here I am asking you to do this massive effort to take my body from Egypt to the land of Canaan. Your mother passes away on the road, and I can't even get her to Mars Machpelah. Like, I know you have hard feelings to me about this. And so we're going to discuss that for a second. But what's interesting is that this is not the logical place for that conversation to have been. The logical place for Yaakov to have said this to Yosef was when he says to him, take me to the land of Canaan and bury me there. That's the place where he should have said, and I know that you have these feelings that I didn't do this for your mother, and I didn't put that for your mother, and I'm doing it, and I'm asking you to do this for me, right? It seems like there's this like a bracket stuck in the middle of this conversation where he claims Menashe and Ephraim for himself, and it's kind of weird, and I don't 100% have a good answer for it.
He interrupts himself.
It looks like he's interrupting himself. Here, could you please take me to the land of Canaan, bury me there? Oh, these children are mine. And I know you feel bad because I didn't bury your mother. I didn't take her to Mars Machpelah. I buried her on the side. So there's almost like this brackets in there, which we have to, and so a lot of the commentators want to talk about that the brackets are in the other place, that the explanation of Rachel is more tied to the taking of Ephraim and Menashe than to the request for Yosef. Why? Because we know that Rachel she wasn't the first wife that he married, but she was the Akeret Bait. She was the mainstay of his house. And we know that the generally speaking, the halacha is that the Bukhar, the firstborn, gets. Anybody remember? What does Bukhar get? Double portion. A double portion. A Bukhar gets a double portion. That means somebody passes away and they have 5 children. They divide their estate into 6. Halachically, you don't have to do this with all your money. It's a different conversation. We're not going to take the time now, but officially you're supposed to divide your estate into 6. The Bukhar gets 2 and everybody else gets 1. So a lot of the Mefarshim say that the taking of Ephraim and Manasseh into the tribes is giving Rachel's children the double portion, because she was his main wife. Was Yosef the first child? No, Reuven was the first child, but Rachel is getting the rights of the Bukhar. And so some of the Mefarshim talk about that. There's a lot of other conversation. I'm not going to get into the whole conversation about all different other stuff. I thought that was just one nice thing over there. And now he's going back to the boys again. Okay, now he's going back to the boys again. He wants to know who they are. And Yosef gets nervous. What do you mean? Who are they? You've been learning with my son for the last 17 years. And so Rashi says that he brought his ketubah. He showed that these children were legitimate. And again, Rashi brings that there was a place where Yaakov lost his prophecy when he saw these children. He wanted to give them blessings and he lost his prophecy, which made him nervous. And he was looking long-term. A tzaddik doesn't just look at the children who are standing in front of him. He was looking long-term, and he saw that from each of these children, there were going to be very, very, very terrible people coming out. Very, very terrible people. And Yosef essentially says to him, Yosef's answer, if you see in verse 9, Yosef says, these are my children, Asher Nasani Elokim Bazeh, Hashem gave them to me. And then he says, take them and bless them. And really what Yosef is telling Yaakov is that we cannot be held responsible for what's going to happen in 10 generations. Do the people standing in front of you right now deserve a blessing? Yes. Your vision is showing you that Manasseh is going to come from them and Acha is going to go. They're going to have terrible, terrible, terrible people come from them. But that does not discount the fact that they are deserving of the blessing. And, things may change, they may not change, but you don't lose your right to be blessed because of what's going to happen years in the future. It's just, that's not, and then Yaakov, in fact, does. He is, in fact, going to bless them and tells us that Yisrael's eyes are like it's hard for him to see. He can't see, and he kisses them and he hugs them. And then, if somebody once asked me, I don't know how we had this conversation about like art projects in Jewish daycare. The project that every single child in a Jewish daycare system or kindergarten this week would be some version of hands with what are those things called? How do you make the clocks move? How do you make what's that? It's like a fastener, and the hands are movable, right? Because now we're going to come into this very famous scene of Yaakov blessing Manasseh and Ephraim, and the Torah goes to a lot of length, many psukim, how Yosef takes Manasseh on his left, which is his father's right, and he takes Ephraim on his left, which is on his right, which is his father's left. They're facing each other. Yaakov and Yosef are facing each other, right? So he takes Manasseh on his left, so it's his father's right. He takes Ephraim on his right, which is his father's left. I hope I don't offend any of the lefties. Do we have any lefties in this room? The right in Judaism is considered the more dominant hand. That's why we talk about mitzvahs we always start with the right. It's the chesed side, if you look from Kabbalah. And so so Yosef sets up the children so that it's easy for Yaakov to go like this and bless. The oldest child will get the right hand bracha and the younger child will get the left hand bracha. Okay? And what does Yaakov do? Sikel es yadav, crosses his hands, and he puts his right hand on the younger son and his left hand on the older son. And Yosef says, no, Dad. No, Dad. That's not how it's supposed to go. And the pasuk says that he tried. Vayikach Yosef eshnei. Oh no. One second. Over here, in Shlishi, in verse 17, Yosef sees that he put the hands in it, and he says, no, he says to his father, Lo kenavi, that is not what you're supposed to do. Put your right hand on top of his head, right? And Yaakov says, I know what I'm doing. Yadati b'ni yadati. I know what's going on here. I know what the score is. He's going to be great, but his brother is going to be greater than him. I want to sit on this for a second. A couple of things. First of all, I'm just trying to keep things organized in my head so that everything makes sense. One could say, if Yaakov knows the score and says, you're the younger one's going to be the greater one, why would he not just tell Yosef, switch the kids around? Put the younger kid on my right side, put the older kid on my left side. So it's easier for him. So Rav Druk says, because that would have been very, very embarrassing for Menashe. Menashe is the older son. And to say, switch places, so Yaakov, who's 147 years old and on his deathbed, is still aware that I'm not going to insult or, shame my grandson, I will inconvenience myself. Could you imagine having to hold your hands long enough like this to give a bracha? It's not easy. It's not easy for me, and I'm not 147 years old. I would rather inconvenience myself than shame this child by saying, oh, no, I've got to switch this around. So that's one thing, which is a very interesting thing, I think, to think about. Stam, as Rachel says, fun fact, who's going to come from Ephraim? Who's going to be the greater? No, Ruth is not. Ruth comes from Moab. Who is going to be the leader that comes from Ephraim that Yaakov's like, wow, shining star?
Moshe?
Nope. Joshua. Yoshua comes from Ephraim. Yeshua is going to come from, and Yeshua is going to have power. We know in the Navi talks about during the war, he stops the sun. He does that with his power as a son of Yosef. He's like Ephraim, who Yoshua is going to come from him. Enkamo Yoshua. There's going to be nobody ever. There Moshe, Yoshua, and that was the two biggest prophets that we're going to ever have. So because Yeshua comes from Ephraim, he's going to be the greater one. There's a Torah from the Degel Machan Ephraim, who is a grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. He's the son of the Baal Shem Tov's daughter. And I don't remember his name, and I should have written it down, but I thought I was going to remember. And guess what? I didn't remember. But he wrote a sefer called the Degel Machan Ephraim. And in this sefer, he writes about this particular area that what is the source of their names? If you remember Menashe and Ephraim, what is the source of their names? Right? Menashe was Kinashani Elokim es Beis Aviv es Amalai, that Hashem made me forget everything and all the pain and the trauma of where I was growing up. And Ephraim's Kihifrani, Hashem made me fruitful. Hashem made me multiply, and I was able to be productive and everything. So the Degel Machan Ephraim brings a play on the words, and he says that Menashe is Nashani Elokim. The tzaddik is looking at somebody who forgot God. The original translation that Hashem made me forget my family and whatever. Degel Machan Ephraim says, you look at somebody and we look at them and we say, Nashani Elokim, this is somebody who's forgotten God. They've lost their way. They're not so connected. We've all done those projects, somebody holds up a picture with a dot on it, and what do you see? And everybody says, I see the dot. Right? Nobody sees the big, white, clean place. You walk into a room that's neat. You never say, wow, this room is so neat. You walk into a room that has three things out of place, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's a mess, right? That's the Menashe headspace. The forgetting, the not being lined up with purpose. And that's often what we see first. Menashe is actually born first. And the Degel Machane Ephraim says that's our inclination is that we see that first. And the Ephraim, that being productive and being growing and doing and being, that's not what we do. We look at somebody, we don't automatically see their positive points and their growth and their deliciousness. We see, keeping me up at night. I can't sleep. I have to say, couldn't you do this? Couldn't you? And the Degel Machane Ephraim says that's human nature. That's human nature, that when we look, and really Menashe came first. Menashe was the firstborn. But what do we need to do? We need to switch our hands. If our right hand is our dominant way of looking, we need to look at I'm adding, because he says about another person, we need to look at ourselves. We need to look at our children. We need to look at people in our sphere of influence. We need to put our right hand on their growth. We need to put our right hand on their Ephraim and say, Kol hakavod, you did great. This is amazing. When we see it, we bring more of it. We have to train ourselves to put our right hand on Ephraim and our left hand on Menashe. Things that need to be fixed, things that need to be helped, things that need to be changed, things that need to be tweaked. We're not ignoring it. We're not saying it doesn't exist. We're not saying everything's rosy and wonderful. We have no issues. But what do we see first? What's our first inclination? The kid comes in and they drop their bag. I'm talking to myself because this actually happened in my house multiple times, including yesterday. Kid comes in the house, drops their bag in the middle of the floor. Is the first word out of my mouth, I'm so happy to see you, or pick up your bag? Right? That's what I think the Degel Machane Ephraim is saying. We need to be able to, first of all, look and say, we have to see the good. We have to see the positive. We also have to deal with the negative. We can't just say they're wonderful, they have no issues. I'm not saying that. But what do we see first? What do we highlight? What do we shine? What do we shine a light on and say, we want more of this? We need to do it for the positive. I had a thought that flew out of my head. Oh, but in case we want, so then you say, why we should just ignore Menashe. We should just ignore him. Then maybe it'll go away. So he says that our growth comes from our place of brokenness, from the place where we stepped away, from the place where we forgot God. When we build on that and we come back, then we really have Ephraim. Menashe is the first. Menashe is the Bechor. There is that place where our growth really does come from that place of, that's the point of falling, that we pull ourselves together and we come back to a better and a stronger place. Our goal isn't, shocking but true, is not to never fall. That's not the goal. The goal is when we fall, can we shake ourselves up, and can we shake ourselves off, and can we get up, and can we continue? Because that's the test. And that's really what he's saying, that from Menashe, you get to Ephraim. From that place of, we did forget about God. Nashtani Elokim, we forgot Hashem, we forgot how beautiful we are in his eyes, we forgot all those things. But when we remember, then we come back and we're so beautiful and so strong and so powerful. And that's really where we need to kind of focus that a little bit. So that was, I usually have a bracha on it, but I'm just flying. So I really want to bless all of us that we tap into our Ephraim. It's so easy. It's so easy to see the things that we don't do right. It's I don't know why it is, but I know we've discussed this before. It's just so easy to see the things that we didn't do properly. And I want to give us a bracha that we look at ourselves with kind eyes, and we look at ourselves and see the things that we're able to do. The things we need to tweak, okay, tweak it. I'm not saying not to, but first and foremost, look at ourselves as beautiful, capable women who are able. And then we're motivated to tweak. If we're just terrible people, why would we want to change anything? It's like, give me some more chocolate cake, right? But if we are strong and capable and beautiful, and we want to do, and we do so much good, and then I'm inspired to pick up, where I'm slacking off. It gives me inspiration to pick up. So I want to give us all that bracha really to see that we are amazing, and that to Hashem, each and every one of us is beyond value. And we should be able to see ourselves like that also. I said to Sarah, somebody said, I said, happy birthday. Somebody said, oh, it's your birthday today. I'm like, no, but I woke up. So doesn't that doesn't that count as a birthday a little bit? So I'm sharing Sarah's birthday from that. It's not my birthday though. And then we have, so that's one. Then the other thing we have over here is that not Hashem. And Yaakov says to Yosef, in addition, that when people want to, first of all, the bracha that he actually gives Menashe and Ephraim is very famous. Hamalach Hagol. They see the angel who guarded me should bless these children, and you should call my father's names, and they should multiply like fish in the midst of the earth. Whatever they get a beautiful bracha. And then Yaakov also says that when people want to bless their children, they are going to use Menashe and Ephraim to bless them, right? When we bless male children, what do we say? Anybody? What do we say? Yisimcha Elokim Ke'Ephraim Menashe. And to a girl, we say, right? So when we want to bless our male children, we say that God should make you like Ephraim and Menashe. And first of all, we put Ephraim before Menashe, which is how Yaakov did it. But I want to also highlight here a thing that we spoke about, that Menashe and Ephraim were the only two grandchildren who were born away from the family, and they were able to be proud, strong Jews even without the family around them. And that is what the blessing that we're really giving our children, that no matter where you are, no matter what circumstances you find yourselves in, no matter where you are, no matter what you do, you have the ability to really be productive, to really be amazing, and to really shine. It doesn't matter. We could come up with 500 excuses of why we aren't capable of living up to our potential. But Menashe and Ephraim tell us, if they could do it, we could do it. They grew up in Egypt with no family, with nothing. They grew up with their parents, but there was no support system at all. And they were able to be strong, proud Jews. There's no reason why we can't do it, no matter where we are, no matter where we live. Okay. The next thing that happens is that Yaakov calls all his sons and he gives them all blessings. We're not going to go through all the blessings because we have 4 minutes left. Some of the blessings don't actually seem like blessings. Reuven and Shimon and Levi, he kind of tells them off. He says Reuven is impetuous, and Shimon and Levi, which is so interesting, because it's like very modern psychological thought. But Yaakov says it to them way before modern psychology. He says to Shimon and Levi, Aror apam, cursed is your anger. He talks about their anger. He doesn't talk about them being bad. He says that your anger is gets you into trouble. When we talk about not labeling a child, label the behavior. So Yaakov led the way for us on that one. Goes through all the children, gives them all different blessings. He gives long blessings to Yehuda and to Yosef. And at the end of this, he sort of comes into himself, and it doesn't actually say that he passes away. One second, let me find the end where so chapter 49, verse 33, Yaakov finishes giving, he finishes giving his blessings to all his children, and he gathers in his legs, and vayigva vayasaf elamav, and he sort of expires, and he is gathered unto his people. And Rashi points out that it doesn't actually say that he died. So he says Yaakov Avinu lo meis, that Yaakov never actually passes away. And Rashi clarifies Mazara b'chaim afu b'chaim, as long as his children are alive and living in his way, so too. So he is also alive. Actually, Rashi doesn't say that. Other people say that. I forgot. I'm sorry. That as long as his children are living in his way, then he continues to live. Okay, and then there's a whole how they go about taking him, and they bury him. There's a whole conversation which we missed. The Egyptians embalm him, and they take him up to they get him up with great pomp and ceremony. Yaakov actually set up exactly how he should be carried and who should carry him on what side. And years later, when the Jews are going to be in the desert and they set up their encampment in the desert, they're going to copy the directions that Yaakov gave. So when he said, Reuven and Shimon and not Levi, Reuven, Shimon, and Dan, I think, whatever the directions are, I forgot. I usually have this in my, the easy ones to know is Ephraim, Menashe, Ephraim and Menashe. Ephraim, Menashe, and Binyamin have one side. He gave everybody the sides. When the Jews are actually going to set up their camp in the desert, they're going to copy that formation, and they take them up. Yosef doesn't carry, Levi doesn't carry. So one of the questions that we started off is of the question that gets asked is why do Yosef and Levi not carry Yaakov? Why are they not part of this, such a mitzvah to help your parent get buried? And because the beginning we say that when Yaakov passes away, the exile gets worse. So Yosef and Levi, who do not experience exile in Egypt, cannot be part of the procession that carries him out. They cannot be part of the procession that makes the exile worse, meaning Yosef's not going to be involved, and the tribe of Levi doesn't end up doing any of the work. They never signed up for servitude. They never end up working. So they're not allowed to be part of the, making the gullus worse for anybody. And then they come back. And then when they come back, there's a whole incident with Yosef and his brothers, which you don't have time. I want to finish the Parsha and say that Yosef tells his brothers, and he tells his children, we're going to go all the way to the end of the Parsha, that chapter 50, verse 24, Yosef says to his brothers, I'm going to die. He actually dies the first of all the brothers. He dies, he's 110 years old. So he is king. We talked about for 80 years, right? He becomes king at 30. So he's king for 80 years. He's king for over 50 years after his father passes away. Tells his brothers that I am going to pass away. And he says, Pakod Yifkadeschem, Hashem is going to remember you, and he's going to take you out of here to the land that he promised to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And he makes them swear, and he says, when Hashem remembers you, you should please take me out of here with you. Parenthetical and spoiler for next week, when Moshe is going to come back to redeem the Jewish people, he's going to use that expression of Pakod Yifkod, because when Yosef tells his brothers, Pakod Yifkod, Hashem will surely remember, he is in effect telling them that the Redeemer will come and he will have to have these code words. If somebody comes to take you out and does not use these words, they are not the real McCoy, and do not follow them. So when Moshe comes, he's in fact going to use that same expression. And the other thing is that Yosef, and this is such a powerful thing, Yosef, who is the king of Egypt for 80 years, king, second in command, whatever, he was a big shot there. He tells his children to tell their children that when you leave, take me with you. That you look at me and you say, you have reached the heights of power in this country. You are so entrenched. And still, this is not my home. This is not where I'm going to be. This is not where I'm going to be staying. And if that's true of Yosef, how much more true is that going to be for all the other Jews in the land of Egypt? In case we want to make sure, okay, forget about the slavery, which definitely assured it, but in case we want to make sure that the Jews never become so entrenched in Egypt that they don't want to leave, because we've had this experience. When the Jews come back to build the second temple, a huge majority of the Jewish people do not leave Babylonia. They're happy, they're settled, they're part of the culture, they have their Torah, they have their stuff. So one of the things that Yosef is giving the message to his children, this is not our place. This is never going to be our place. And when you leave, it's not practical. You're not going to be able to get me out of Egypt now. Please take me with you. And essentially, we end up having these two tzaddikim. I'm sorry, I'm taking one more minute of your time. We end up having two tzaddikim who are tied to the Jewish people, who are in two positions to help them. We have Yaakov, who is buried in the land of Canaan, who stands as, like the Medrash says, he stands like when you see somebody drowning and you stand on firm ground and you throw a lifeline to them so you could pull them in. That's Yaakov. He's in the land of Canaan and he's there advocating for his children. And you have Yosef, who is buried in Mitzrayim. He's in exile. He's a place for the people of Israel to come and to daven and to say, Yosef, you got to pull some strings. We got to get out of here. This is enough. This is enough. This is enough. So we have two tzaddikim who actually help the people in different ways. One who stays with them, and one who is on the solid ground, ready to pull them out. And this is where our parsha ends, where Yosef is actually buried, and he's put in. They embalm him and they put him into Egypt. And really, 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 that is the biggest consolation for the Jewish people, that Yosef stays with them. He doesn't leave them. In case you want to say, oh, everybody's leaving and we got stuck here by ourselves. No, Yosef's like, I'm here with you. I'm going to stay with you. You might say, oh, practical reasons you couldn't take him, but spiritually, Yosef is there with them, giving them strength while they're in exile and while they're suffering. He's there, and he's like, and he gives them the promise, we are going to leave. I promise you. And when you leave, take me with you. And that's where our parsha ends, and that's where our chumash ends. I want to give us one last bracha. One last bracha. Why not, right? I give one last bracha. That wherever we need to pull our strength from, whether we pull our strength from somebody who's the tzaddik who's standing on firm ground and pulling us out, or whether we go to kivrei tzaddikim, to people, we should know that wherever we are never alone. We are never alone, no matter where we are. I'm not saying walk down dark alleys by yourself without, I'm not saying that. But we need to know that wherever we are, and whenever we're in a place of struggle, whenever we're in a place of doubt of what I should do or where I should go or what I should do, we should know that we always have support, whether it's somebody who's there throwing us a lifeline, whether it's somebody, a tzaddik who's davening for us, whether it's the people that we love who are our support system, who are cheering us on, whether the people we need to reach out for the support that we have. It's always, always, always there. And whenever we think we can't do it on our own, we probably cannot, but we are not on our own. And that's really what I want us to remember, that no matter where it is, we are never, ever, ever alone. We should have the most amazing, amazing clarity to know where we are, what we are, who we are, where we need to go. And I say it all the time, and courage to step into that space. Have an awesome rest of the day.